Well, good evening to you and welcome to this program of Walter Rodney Groundings. I'm your host, Dion Abrams, and my usual guest is with me again today, Brother TACUMA OGUNSEYE, and together we'll be talking about issues that are current and some not so current, but as usual, we're discussing the political situation in Guyana. Welcome to the program, Brother TACUMA.
As usual, it's always a pleasure, to come and to discuss these matters with our viewership.
Well, we're in the festive season. Any message from the Working People's Alliance and the nation in relation
I
to?
mean, the WPA will wish to extend its greetings to all those who, celebrate, Christmas, both those who are strict Christians and those who are not, because many non-Christians also celebrate Christmas. And with this spirit of the season, we hope that despite all the difficulties, people could just find at least a brief moment of some happiness and some joy. Hope. I guess people have to steel themselves for the new year and the challenges that one could anticipate in the new year. Keep some of the money, don't spend everything out,
Well, that's one of the things. I mean, but apart from that, I mean, Georgetown, I was there about 2 days ago, and it's surprising, the stores were open late into the evening, but the disregard for the COVID situation is quite evident, and I don't know why it is that we are playing games with people's lives. No real attempt at enforcing, sanitization and these things, and it's not the best kind of approach in dealing with the situation. Everything is now open. The minibuses can carry their full loads and everything, but even though you're considering, as the PPP has done from day one since they returned to office, giving the business people the latitude, freedom to exercise whatever you know they want to exercise in terms of gaining from this season, you still have to consider that you have a nation and the interest of people should be foremost in your mind. I don't know what you think.
I agree with you. I mean, I passed through the city on Christmas Eve day. I mean, everything have broken down in terms of the COVID regulations. Except some people maintain the mask, but generally distancing and so everything was broken. It's just like any other Christmas Eve day in the city without COVID, So everything have broken down. We just have to hope and keep our hands crossed that at the end of this festive season, we contribute to our own, worsening situation in terms of the pandemic. And we still on Groundings wish to appeal to citizens to still to try your best to observe the COVID regulations as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, Christmas came and gone, and the whole season will come and gone. But you may still have the virus present, so you have to balance between your immediate happiness, if that is the way you see it, and your long-term security in terms of your health, And of course, as you pointed out, the PPP, from the time they came back, their position was to satisfy the wishes of the private sector. And in so doing, when they relax everything, they also create in the minds of the populace a negative situation too, because the population also throw their hands, down, But we have to be hopeful that we don't get the worst out of it, because this is one of the situations where you don't want political mistakes to lead to misery,
Well, let's hope that it doesn't. I noticed, Brother Oban, that flooding is becoming a frequent phenomenon. We haven't had, apart from when the sea overtopped, particularly on the west coast, But the villages were not inundated
Mm.
in any significant way over the last 5 years. But it seems to be a, you know,
Growing problem now.
yeah, growing problem. I don't know what is causing that. But I think it's something that the authorities should pay attention to. And whatever they would have met that they have possibly undone, that they should revisit it.
Yeah, yeah, they should be. You know.
Yeah, because flooding really, it's discomfort.
Yeah, but
For
it
people.
also do a lot of economic damage, especially in the villages.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, because the guy, I mean,
it
people were
destroy people
planting.
planting the livestock, so all kinds of things. You know, so I mean, one of the sad things about this society, in terms of the political behavior of the PPP, is that it's deliberately seek not to build on foundations of the previous administration, which is very petty and it's unfortunate. Because I mean, things like flooding, whatever the administration previously did that improve the drainage systems and so, you should build on it, not to remove people and to create a new order right away, so these things, and a lot of it sometimes when you really get down to the bottom of it, I don't want to speculate in this particular incident because I really don't know what is really the situation on the ground. But a lot of it, when you look at it, is the pettiness on the ground because they're removing people and some quietly, in areas that you may think that the government may not pay much attention to. They're very, fine teeth comb, and they want to replace pumper tenants with their own people, this body with their own people, and people who probably used to clean the drains, and so they want to give these contracts or these assignments to their own people. So in the process of the transition, all kinds of things could happen. But I must concede, I'm just speculating, because I don't have the details, but I suspect that some of that what is happening, that is contributing to some of these resurgence of flood, in some of these communities.
And water, what is the situation you reported last week?
Yes, remember the last program, we highlighted the plight of the Sophia residents in sections of C field, B field, and A field. Remember they weren't getting water for at least more than 6 weeks. And I was told that the very next day after the program, a team from the water authority went into the area and assure citizens that they will address the problems. And a few days after, water began to flow into through the taps. But then subsequently, it cut off, and at present they're not really having water for. So the program did contribute to getting the attention of the authorities and getting a little relief for the residents. But the situation, as I was about to come on this program, I received a telephone call that they're back to normal, square one, no water at all. So we have to keep pressing the case for the Sophia residents, and put GWI under, consistent pressure to fix that problem. Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that that inbox, and again the pressure has decreased tremendously, so that, like I said last week, you're really not getting any water with any force to take it to the first floor anymore, and so on. So you have to go downstairs to fetch up water, or you got a pump or something to facilitate that. But even the pump, I burnt within a few weeks because you put on the pump
and no water.
water.
Pump just
It burns,
runs.
yeah, it burns, right? I even bought a fixture to put on top. It should cut it off automatically and so on, but that's not helping much. So hopefully, whatever the problems are, that they can be remedied, because these are amenities that people need. It reduces your discomfort and makes life much easier for citizens. I noticed that, all right, well, hopefully I see Minister Edgel in Albaiston and so on, and they're giving out contracts to CDCs for clean maintenance of drains and so on. It's not a bad initiative.
But they're trying to bypass the city council.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
They're undermining the city council capacity of the city council have developed over the last 5 years, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
You know,
it's and that because it's not going to be sustainable.
It's sustainable.
They're not going to sustain it to the level where the drains are going to remain clean perpetually. What's going to happen? They're going to clean now and wait for another year, 2 years. It gets back to the same state. Then they're going to come up with another initiative to desilt it again and so on. But those drains need to be kept clean all the time.
All the time.
You know, it's...
And you need to develop the city council's capacity to deliver the service.
To deliver that service.
You know.
So, and then there is this big fight between the Minister of Local Government and the City Council in terms of him trying to, you know,
exert his political
authority,
control unlawfully in many cases over the city council. It is the extension of the PPP political fight to dominate the city. You know, it's part of the domination program. You know, but people have to push back. You know.
Yeah, definitely, and I admire the mayor for
for
his stance. You know, I mean, he's not really allowing them to have their way in this regard, and that's the kind of resistance we need. At least letting the minister know his place.
You're right.
You know, and it's really sad, but so far the mayor has challenged the minister to present him with the law, the section of the law that gives him the authority to appoint and reappoint and to make these interventions that he wants to make into the city council. But I haven't seen any response in that regard from the minister. So maybe you can ask Nandalal to find it.
And you see, this is the area where the so-called Democrats and all of those who were very critical of the coalition government, when these crises appear, you know, and controversy, we should hear them speaking out. They should help to clarify the situation as independent arbiters, you know, whether there is a basis for the minister position or whether the law supports the mayor's position. I mean, if you want to enhance democracy and they want to have a respectful role, these are matters that they should be engaging in when these controversies develop, and to provide them some leadership and clarity. But you know, the problem with civic society forces in this country, the country is so polarized, you know, that everything is reduced to party consideration or ethnic consideration.
Which is really a sad thing, because we're really not going to move forward in any significant way. Because people's views are always clouded. And the positions that they should take that would bring relief, a general sense of order.
Yes, and objectivity.
And objectivity.
It's not there.
Never there. Never there. So it's either pulling to one side or the other. And whether it's negative or positive, once it suits them.
Once it's from my side is okay.
Yeah, it's okay. You know, it's not good enough. And we see that, well, look at the Argentine investigator. I mean, you may have something to say on
Yeah. But before we get there, before it slipped me, the residents of fire haven't got addressed the matter concerning the cash transfer as yet, you know.
Okay.
And we promised to keep it in the forefront of the program, you know. So, you know, I want to remind the authorities that the residents at 616 Barford Harmony is still to be paid the COVID-19 cash relief. And Groundings have made a commitment to keep this matter in the forefront of their attention. So every program until they pay, we're going to raise this matter, you know.
What's the situation with Sophia and the cash transfer?
Well, as I mentioned the last time, you know, there was a lot of issues of people not being paid, you know. They turn up persons at work and so, you know, so once you were at work, you can't get paid. and then
The pink slip is
yeah, the
elusive.
pink slip and the elusive problems. But the particular case that I highlighted, was more straightforward,
Yeah, I know.
because that person, okay, wasn't at home when they returned on the second time. The household had the lady had she granddaughter, which is secondary school, second form, poor child, had all the necessary documentations. He had a relative working in the yard. They came, they checked, they agreed that she should be paid, but then they said they left the money with the child, And then two Sundays ago when they passed, the lady drew to the attention that you are gonna come here to pay, and they said, look, your name is up on this list, and they went and pay the neighbor, which is the Indian person, and they create that kind of they play that kind of game, antagonism, so the African household is not paid, but the Indian household is being paid.
But
And when you draw it to the attention, the poor senior person in charge, very arrogant, so we have to fight these matters, It's not so much the money, man. It's the principle we have to fight for, And we have to learn. You see, the people can't have it both ways. They can't want to argue that they want a rule of law and they want democracy, and when they have to administrate a public policy that they want to have the right, to change the laws and the rules to suit, their own circumstances. We have to fight against those things,
But with this very transfer, apart from the fact that they're picking and choosing whom they want to give, I heard the Minister of Finance saying that now a household is a whole house. I mean, they've changed the, you maybe separate families, but they're taking the household. Even if it's an apartment, this thing is a house. So
they're redefining household,
right?
Totally outside the traditional understanding
of what a household
because
is. In the national census,
there's approach. There's certain things have established.
You go as a household. It's you have your family. You're cooking your own food. You're doing this. You're a household.
It's not science. We have already walked this road before.
Well, they're saying so now they have redefined the whole thing
because they don't want to pay a number of people.
Well,
they're going back on the word,
and they're going back on a national policy.
And we have to keep them, on the program we have to keep them under, constant pressure and exposure as this thing unfolds.
Because if you use the data from the census, if that data is examined, and you check the number of households on the census data, and you check it with the distribution that they have given out as number of households, you'll see the disparity. Yeah. So you will have to ask, how is it that in a census that was conducted, and of course when the census was conducted, since when? Can't remember the year, my wife worked during that time. But if you compare it now, obviously there may be more households. Yeah. And you measure that against what they're coming up with as COVID relief, you will see the wide disparity in terms of the distribution that they have done as against.
You see, they're coming down to Region 4. Remember, they start with looking after the areas that they have a lot of political control over. Region 4. So now they come to Region 4, they're trying to cut out as much money as possible. I know. Very unfortunate. It's consistent with the beast that we're dealing with.
Yeah, the nature of the I don't know, I haven't gotten any word from my friends on the west side in relation to their problem. We'd ask that they come. But I presume that, things have been settled, that there has been no further intervention by the Ministry of Agriculture to appropriate those lands that are part of the village. And we're just advising you to be vigilant and to stand firm whenever any such attempts, are made. We were talking about the Argentine.
Yeah, it's
Before.
so yes.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I want us to, we have to on the program recognize initiatives by citizens, and I saw a letter by a group of prominent Guyanese, I think about 30 something to 40 persons, sign a joint letter calling on the government, the president and the government to allow the Argentina forensic team, to play a role in the investigation of the Berbice killings, I think it's a good initiative coming from public citizens, and I think that Groundings and the WPA wish to join, and give our support to the initiative, These kinds of initiatives are always welcome,
Yeah, well, once citizens begin to again understand their role in ensuring that the society is run in a way that is not based upon bias and political agendas favorable to one set of people, then you we need more of those voices.
Yeah, yeah.
The voice of reason, so that the tension in the society can be somehow abated or eased.
But what is also more, to me, equally important is that when these independent voices speaks, it gives the government or the opposition, depends on who's involved, a chance to demonstrate their position on issues. So it have to clarify the nature, of the people you're dealing with in terms of a particular problem. And in this case, the thing is directed to the government and the president.
Mm-hmm.
And the president, in the early stages of this thing, and the government have made their position very clear that they're willing to do everything in their powers to get to the bottom of this thing. And all as this situation normalize, you see, they begin to retreat from that commitment. So when public citizens who have no political agenda, speak out and put some pressures on the government have two options: either to continue on its negative attitude to the problem, or correct itself and go back to its original position, which was the better position. So these opportunities give them a chance to either continue along their crooked ways or to correct themselves. And they should feel less under pressure than if it come from Groundings or if it come from the official opposition,
No,
So
but,
they have a chance.
I mean, the position taken is kind of strange, because if you have three persons murdered in brutal fashion, you're the government. What is it, about your administration that would prevent you from wanting some finality to, the reason, the perpetrators, finding, some kind of closure for the relatives of this disaster? Why is it that they're so reluctant? What is in it for them, really?
I've always felt, and I said it on the earlier programs when we dealt with the Barbie thing. This is a atrocity that took place in the PPP domain, in a community that dominated by the PPP and its supporters, and it has, from their point of view, they know it have implications, political and other racial implications, and they're not keen on rooting with the perpetrators because it will conform, the nature of the killings.
Okay.
So I think that is their mere concern. I'm not, as I said before in the initial programs, I'm not accusing them of instigating the killings, but it happened in the theater. Remember when anything happened in Boston, used to call upon the government to be responsible because it happened in your area. You got to control them people. Now that something happened vicious, something vicious, and happened in their area, which is more likely to be involved their people. They're just protecting their turf. That is what they're committed to. And the nonsense we're just saying that they're not going to, the minister thinks Roopsumben said that the government policy is that they're not going to go outside the traditional collaboration. Like they're collaborating with certain forces, like, CARICOM and the UK and probably America. They ain't going out of that. I mean, it's stupid, it's very stupid.
But they had made contradictory statements earlier that Jack Dew himself said that if the team comes, it's not a problem and all these things. Yeah. So what is the swing about now?
As I told you, I don't think they want that problem to be resolved. They rather they feel politically they have more to gain with it being unresolved and it's being resolved.
It's a dread situation. It means that we're back to a point where lives have become meaningless, and that is sad because if it spells what can happen for the future, then we're looking down a road that
it's tragic because on the question of the right to life and thing, you really want clear and decisive political leadership at the national level that we have no tolerance to that kind of thing, and we will do everything in our power as a nation to respect the right of life, regardless of what's the consequences and what is the price you got to pay. But that is not the level of their commitment.
All right. Let's hope that some sense of reasoning, putting aside all the things that you said, that the work may be permitted to continue and every area that is requested for support, that it would be facilitated so that the investigation can move forward.
And we want to, before we come off of that, to condemn the police treatment of the Henry family. Remember the day when they were leaving from the the activity where they export, give a kind of initial, not a report, initial discussion on what they have been doing around the world and so. Both families were there because I was there, and then it was I really was taken back to hear that the Henry family end up being brutalized and that way the police. Once you hear the Henry family, you hear the people coming, it's really showing insensitiveness of the police,
some kind of collusion, collaboration, intent.
Like somebody want to make a point,
Right.
But sometimes as political people, you don't really want to, jump at these automatic reflexes, but you're hard pressed. I'm hard pressed to even if the police make an initial mistake, quickly there must be enough people in the station, senior officers and them kind of thing, to say legal retreat for this thing, this thing. And when you watch the police official statement and the amount of charges that they give the people, it's the leadership of the police in that station, and I think the police in general, because I think the commissioner of police must know that situation should be handled differently. Okay, and while the commissioner probably don't have authority to overrule, what the junior people do in most circumstances. I sure the senior leadership should have given more leadership there, man, and say, look, this line of march will make the force look bad. It can't hold. But the fact that they pile up so many charges, and
then brutalize
the people, then pile up so many charges, against them.
And then they publish a long list of offenses that people should not be arrested for. Including
the one that
they're reminding the officers that these offenses are ticketable offenses. Yeah. You ain't really got to arrest people for them. You give them a ticket and so on. Yeah.
And I'm still to hear a very firm condemnation of the government. I think I saw somewhere that they said investigations is ongoing, or began.
Yeah,
but I haven't heard anything from the government.
But what we should do, is agitate for those charges to be dropped.
Yeah. We should start. Yeah.
Because it's really outrageous.
Yeah.
We're going down a road that, oh boy, I don't know what's really happening in such a short time. We've had, instances. The police are now becoming the focus again. Look at the Loziknan situation. I mean,
Yeah.
we haven't heard anything yet. I mean, recently the relative of the senior guy that was shot, who was supposed to be released within a few weeks, they were again on television demanding
Justice.
some kind of justice for that.
You see, the police, I mean, when you compare the rapidity in which the police force seems to be deteriorating since the coalition leave office and the PPP resume office, it's very worrying. Because as soon after we saw a rise of police shooting. They're shooting at protesters, whether it's in Borbis, protesters for land, the dispute, land dispute for housing success, This whole doctrine of shooting at citizens, seems to be resurfacing, in a very troubling way. And the police elements who seems to be in charge of the stations and now, is beginning to believe that the old order has returned, And we have to keep our eyes on the situation and keep exposing these excesses. And I think that as you mentioned the Henry family thing, it really highlights, the degeneration, and the politicalization of the police, in a certain way, in a partisan way,
So we're hopeful and we're demanding that the charges against the family be dropped. That if you have published a list of ticketable offenses and that list includes the fact that, you don't have your license on you, but the guy showed evidence
on his phone
that he has a license, then give them a ticket.
Yeah.
Drop the charges, give them a ticket, and let them pay for the ticket. You can't be saying one thing and then you acting contrary in that regard. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we were hoping and, demanding that transpires.
But I think all those assault charges should go because one thing leads to the other.
Yeah. Definitely. Anyhow, power in the hands of people who are autocrats with dictatorial tendencies, it's going to be overused. The Public Service Union has made a statement on the GCOM workers.
The public
in
response to the private sector.
Yeah.
Yes, it was private.
relation
The
to
private sector were waging
Right.
their campaign,
Right.
urging GCOM to take action against workers,
Yeah.
They're now judge and jury, They tried the case. they decide the people guilty.
And then they must be fired.
And they must be fired, And I was glad that the Public Service Union decided to represent and speak out, because some of those persons are members of the union. But more important, it is good that the institutions, fight these matters because as I said just now, the people can have it both ways. You can't say you believe in the rule of law when it suits you. The law is very clear. Everybody is assumed innocence until proved guilty in a court of law. And regardless of what you may think about what workers in GCOM did or didn't do, it is not the private sector commission to decide on whether the actions violate the law. The matter is already before a court. And one have to question, the private sector commission intention, because these matters have already before the court. All you have to do is wait for the court to pronounce, but they have a political agenda, that is beyond what the interests ought to be. And I was glad that the Public Service Union came out and that statement people should read, because I think it was a well written statement in defense of the workers, and I just want to draw it to the attention of the nation, persons who may not have seen the statement. They should look at the last Probably the Thursday papers. If not Thursday, it might be Thursday or Friday papers. You know.
But,
So we want to salute them. You know.
but the Private Sector Commission has over the years demonstrated, look at Gavaya's behavior prior to the swearing of the PPP when GCOM was having those issues. I mean, even members of the private sector had to come out against him when he was allegedly making statements that, were basically of his own design and without consulting with the body as such. But we see that pattern continuing in terms of the private sector taking positions that run contrary to what is, you can say, legitimate, right, and basically sensible and legal. The other thing is, because the situation at GCOM is not the first to have occurred. Vincent Alexander also wrote a very striking letter in relation to the position of the PSC and GCOM, and he sets out the history of transgressions under Gokul Budu and Do Not Sing in relation to GCOM. And the last point he was making, that even while GCOM was deliberating the results in the elections of 96, I think, they had not concluded allocation of seats and so on. They were in a meeting and Do Not swore in the president, Janet Jagan, right? And we didn't get any. So there are a list of transgressions committed during the PPP time, but all those instances favored returning the PPP to power.
Yeah, you see, so the
private sector never came out to condemn, to criticize, to utter a word.
The private sector in this country is not an objective organization. It's very partisan, pro PPP, and that is why they don't really contribute to the improvement of the political and social environment in the country.
It would have been 97. After 97, we had the.
They want to argue that they have an important role to play, but then they're playing this role in a very opportunistic way, and it's being counterproductive, and you have to keep exposing them, keep exposing them.
Yeah, but I mean, it shows a lack of. I mean, they don't care. The fact is, they have no moral sense of. They ain't got any morals in terms of right, wrong, and
when people are economic vultures, they're so morally and socially, the positions are influenced greatly by that. I mean, one don't want to, sometimes move these things too personal upon the national TV, but you cannot avoid sometimes looking at the character of these persons, the history and the behavior,
and the benefits,
and the activities they are involved in, and to see how those activities, are supported by government, and so forth, and that determines the outlook and the politics. You have to look at all of those things, and while on any matter, we would want to have a society that we could have a kind of general and broad consensus on as many matters as possible. And in terms of the conduct of elections, Groundings, the WP, is committed and have always been committed to fair and free elections, and elections are free from fear, and elections are conducted with the highest possible standards. But those are the ideals. And we have, as a society, we have been struggling with that. And I feel that generally, the majority of Guyanese would want those ideals to become a reality. But it can't become a reality if we're doing it in a very partisan way, and if we're not sticking to principles. Regardless of where the chips fall, principles must be respected. You can't go after alleged rigors of one side, and the alleged rigors of the other side is not being dealt with, and expect you're going to have a national consensus on the matter of electoral conduct. I mean, and this is what, to me, is more concerning, because we're further away from consensus than we ought to be, And it's basically because, everything is politicalized, and being politicalized in a very negative way, intended to reap, a political harvest for the PPP, So that is it, and they control the media and
And they got a good budget allocation.
Everything,
So the budget, I mean, the public service got nothing.
Yeah, the private sector get it bountiful.
And they got it bountiful. So
taxes, reduction in taxes.
They are returning
the favor.
The favor. For the gifts that they've received.
They've received,
Right, and the Gael workers, I mean, Gael.
Yes, the last couple of years, the Gael workers had to came out in protest. They had to down their tools. They're claiming that the previous board, that the board, while the APMUFC was in government, the coalition was in government, had agreed, in their negotiations, that the workers will get increase in wages and so forth. Since the PP came to power, they appointed a new board, and the new board walked away from the agreement. And the workers had to down their tools, in protest, So Groundings and the WPA wish to stand in solidarity with those workers. And we think that they're quite right, Workers have to begin to fight the battles,
Mm-hmm.
You can't allow the intimidation and the threats which they normally, carried out against workers, which some officials did in terms of these Gael workers. But the workers made their point, and I think that is what is important.
Yeah.
The working people have to come out and demand their part of the pie, because if they don't do it, they're not going to receive much from this government, So I'm heartened that the workers came out. It's not a question of whether you succeed or you don't succeed right away. The question is, you make this statement.
Mm-hmm.
You show your willingness to fight for your interests.
Yeah.
Success may come immediately, success may come later. But you have to signal to this government, your will is not being crushed.
Yeah, and the other thing is too, I mean, in relation to that situation, I heard one union leader saying that they're claiming that Gael hasn't made a profit, and the evidence from their annual reporting, financial reporting, shows that they made a massive haul in terms of profits, and that they are using that profit to give bonuses, to give some kind of incentive to some group. I can't remember exactly, but they're ignoring the workers, right? They're ignoring the workers, and they're giving out monies in other directions, which shows a clear sense of, wanting to victimize people.
Yeah.
But I mean, this widespread victimization of workers, of people whom they associate with the opposition, basically because of their skin color and so on. It's really outrageous,
Yeah.
I
read somewhere that either the workers contend in disputing the company claim, the workers claim, and they made over $1 billion profit.
Yeah. Significant profits.
Yeah. And what angered the workers is that the previous board had agreed, to pay increases and so, and this board automatically decided that, they're not honoring it. There's a new order. So it seems that the word is out that government workers in certain sections must not be given any priority. and that the pressure must
until they clean up and put
who they want.
who they want.
So that seems to be the line of march. And workers have to resist, and I'm glad, as I said, I'm glad that the oil workers, held the ground and they closed the pumps down for a while and let them see that, workers still have the capacity to think. And I think the CCW is representing them. So the union's leadership have to stand with the workers and the members,
Definitely, but we need a lot more action because there is an obvious need for a vigilant approach to the actions of the PVP and the excesses that they have so far exercised. I mentioned the case of Reuben Henry, where they practically lied about the guy's involvement in matters related to selling of house lots and so on in Essequibo Region 2. But the fact is, once they do these things, they stain people's character, they're not, even when they're outed and the public becomes aware of their conniving nature, they don't go back and try to correct these things. They have done it, and that is it. You become a victim, and so you left to suffer in that regard. And the only recourse people have is the courts. And then, the cost to repair the damage that they have done, sometimes it's not
affordable.
People wait and they say it's not really worth it. So a lot of these instances where they've simply done people wrong, that is why I'm saying that, if we have conscionable legal minds who can sit down and review all these instances and bring all the cases together, and deal with it. File one massive lawsuit against them, challenging their behavior.
There's opinion that the courts are not being used sufficiently in Guyana, but that might be true. But as we said, the cost to use these courts, are very serious. A lot of people really can't afford it.
I know.
Can't afford it.
I remember many years ago I had a discussion with Peter Britton, a legal luminary, and he was telling me, he said, man, how much cases I fight for you.
Yeah. Peter fought a lot of cases with WPA and the opposition in general in his time.
He said,
yeah.
Well, Nigel is doing a tremendous
good job.
But you're not finding
much of them.
A whole lot of people who are willing to come out and be like that. It's hopefully the conscience of man really does change. But since the advent of the PPP, apart from all these things that we've had, there is a sense that there is a reemergence of the drug on the world. How credible is the perception?
Well, I think that the evidence is clear, and that burst in Europe, where I can't remember the exact amount of cocaine that was found transported from Guyana, that amongst the biggest bursts in the history of the world, speaks for itself. And then subsequently after that, we have had other bursts. But what I think is important is that these things occurred soon after the PVP resumed office. It's like the boys were just waiting, for the opportunity, And and I think it is worrying. We have to watch it because it is not going to get better unless there's a real public outcry, and it may come more than a public outcry. But the consequences of the rebirth to the criminal state, driven by narcotics and other illegal activity, is very dangerous to society, and it also creates a distortion of the economic and social reality in the country. because it undermines economic competitiveness. You know, we say we're in a so-called free, free market economy. But when people could, through the drug trade, interject into the economy tremendous amount of millions of US dollars being converted into $1 million converted into Guyana currency over 200 million Guyana dollars. When that kind of inflow of drug money come into the economy, it distorts the economic system, and it makes the talk about competitiveness and level playing field a joke. So it has, that kind of economic consequences that is extremely negative for the country. It brings some economic benefits for those who are involved, but why on the wider scale of things, it is economically counterproductive. And of course, we know the social consequences of it. They say once a country become a drug trafficking country, eventually you become a consuming country, because some of the same drugs that pass through, slip out of the system, and you find your own people begin to consume drugs, and
And then
socially,
the emergence of gangs again.
all kinds of things, gangs again, defending turfs, So we have to watch at that situation, and I'm very concerned that with the rise of the PPP regime, that the state and the security forces will not be putting the same amount of attention that the coalition government put on trying to, contain and restrain that problem. I think we're more likely to see, as we have already begun to see, a resurfacing of the problem,
Well, it spells disaster for many of our young people. The fact is, they actually draw a lot of young people into the business. And even prior to the election, the talk around was that, even on Facebook, that we waiting for the opportunity, because once the PPP gets back in power, then that we by done waiting for set things up. So there was this idea that there is this group out there that were restricted. The group that was restricted from carrying out the trade in the way that they used to under the PPP, that they were on the sidelines waiting for that opportunity. And that is why we could have had, so shortly after that massive discovery out in
Europe,
Belgium and so on. So we can safely say that the trade has begun, and we are not going to know the extent of it, because it is part of a facet of the administration. They are going to facilitate it as usual, and they're going to continue to have that money injected into the economy to give a false impression of what really is transpiring here in economic terms. And it's really sad, because we're hopeful that we don't have our young people becoming victims in one way, because once you're selling it out there, it eventually is going to be here.
You become a consuming country, right, slowly, because
let's see what happens. Now the court has thrown out the swearing in of Minister Walron. Now she's back as a technocrat.
What I think is important in that is it gives you the handling of the matter by the president and the administration. It gives you a good insight into the very nature of the PPP, and give you a good insight that Ali is not significantly different, on some of these matters than Jack D or any other PPP president. The wall drum matter to me is one of the most simplest matter for the government. you swore the minister, okay, who violated the law. Her dual citizenship, okay, applications haven't been fully approved, okay, at the time of this swearing in. Whether you do it intentionally or do it unintentionally, the fact that it becomes a public matter, to me, is a straightforward matter. All the president should have done is to say we made a mistake and we will correct it, okay, and ask the minister, to resign and appoint the minister. Now, when a president just come to office, you say you're young, you say you're different, and you will go out of your way to address the nation, give the nation assurance that you are satisfied that the minister did the correct thing and nothing is wrong in it,
And
and then subsequently turn out to be that is false. Now, I got problems when political people can't come straight on those simple and most straightforward matters, man. If you can't come clean to the nation on a simple, straightforward matter, we make a mistake, we don't correct it. I can't hold out much for you on the more complicated and the more, and the more partisan political issues. You're going to behave in a certain way. And I think that, that was very disappointing, but it gives a good indication that there's no newness to this administration, and this president doesn't bring anything significantly new, at least at the moral level, because that was the most straightforward matter for them.
Anyhow, the minister is now a technocrat minister, and we can't complain or argue anymore about our status.
Yeah.
Right?
But that's the way it's supposed to be in the first
In the
place.
first instance.
I mean, when a national leader, head of a country, gonna lie upon any pettiness, man, it's.
You were satisfied that the minister will do the right thing and that she is, legitimately sworn in and so on. Well, quickly, time is catching up. I mean, we have some concerns, both you and I, about the focus of the media and the.
Yes. One of the disappointing things in Guyana, is that, we seem to be developing a culture where the media and the critics are more concerned at present of criticizing the opposition, the government, the past government, for what they perceive as shortcomings and so forth. But they're not turning the spotlight on the current government. And I think that it is unfortunate, because when politicians come to power and they exercise that power in the interest of the nation, and they now control the public funds and the authorities and so, it is, if you want to make sure that your country run and your society run properly, you got to turn your focus on the government, in a more intense way than you turn it on the opposition. But because, I guess, the nature, the ownership of the press here, the government, is not being put on a sufficient scrutiny. And so doing what it allows the government to get away with a lot of excesses, and it takes a lot of political pressure off the government, and there seems to be more concern with mounting pressure on the opposition, who is no longer, the opposition politicians is no longer in control of the state. They could hardly do anything to, negatively affect the country, and now, the authorities with the government. And I think that we have to, make these points over and over, even though we understand the nature of the press, but we have to make this observation.
Well, like you said, the media normally set the agenda, and our media have basically been setting the agenda to make the PPP look like uh, shining stars, and to make the opposition look like, uh, you know,
The villains.
the villains.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not. It's a sad thing because, like you said, the resources of the state are controlled by those in power, and how those resources are handled, should be the focus of public attention. The media should be the watchdog for the society, and if they're not doing that, then they're not fulfilling one of the key roles of the media in any society. And we're hopeful that somehow that will change, so that people can feel some sense of involvement, representation,
Fairness.
and fairness as it relates to the media. But again, the, the new year is coming, and we want to wish you all the best for the season, because of course people are still celebrating. And let's hope that you, again, in all your activities, remember that the COVID situation is still present in Guyana, and that people are still dying and contracting the disease. So do the right thing, observe the guidelines as you move about your daily business. Thank you, brother.
And save some of those monies
Yeah,
for the new year. Don't spend everything out.
And Brother Ogun, thanks for being on the program again. And to you people out there, it's been a pleasure being with you once again. Do have a blessed evening. See you next week. Same time, same channel for another program of Walter Rodney Groundings. Good night.